It was an ordinary day when she was told she wasn't needed anymore. But sometimes, being underestimated is the beginning of a story no one saw coming. Margaret Klein had always considered herself the heart of her family. Even in her late 70s, she lived independently in the tidy ranch house she'd called home for nearly 50 years. Her days were full, tending her roses, quilting with friends at the community center, and most of all, spending time with her grandkids, Emma and Toby. She cherished the weekly routine, making pancakes, reading bedtime stories, and sneaking them a second scoop of ice cream when their mother wasn't looking. Her daughter, Laura, was different. Ambitious and pragmatic, Laura worked long hours as a financial planner, her phone glued to her palm even at family dinners. Over the years, Margaret had watched Laura transform from a giggling little girl into a woman who scheduled her life down to the minute. Sometimes, Margaret wondered if Laura saw her as more of a convenience than a beloved mother. It was a Tuesday in late spring when everything changed. Laura called on her lunch break, her voice brisk and hurried. "Mom, can we talk?" she asked. "I know you love helping out, but I'm thinking it's time we find someone else to watch the kids." Margaret's heart skipped. "What do you mean, Laura?" Laura hesitated. "You're getting older, Mom. It's just, the kids have a lot of energy, and I worry about accidents. I want them to be safe. There's a great sitter in the neighborhood. She's younger, more up to speed, you know." The words stung more than Margaret expected. "I haven't let anything happen to them," she said quietly, struggling to keep the hurt from her voice. Laura sighed. "It's not that, Mom. It's just time to let someone else handle things. Enjoy yourself for a change." The call ended quickly, with a promise to keep in touch and visit soon. Margaret sat at her kitchen table for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant chatter of birds outside. She remembered the baby blankets she'd sewn for Emma and Toby, the scraped knees she'd patched up, the whispered secrets at bedtime. It seemed impossible that her role could be cast aside so easily. For days, Margaret kept busy. She weeded her garden until her back ached, baked bread for the church fundraiser, and dusted every corner of her already immaculate home. But the absence of her grandchildren's laughter was a wound that refused to heal. Her phone sat silent on the counter. Laura's name never flashed on the screen. Friends noticed the change. At quilting group, Margaret was quieter, more withdrawn. Nora, her closest friend, invited her out for coffee. "You don't seem yourself lately," Nora said gently. Margaret confided the truth, tears pricking her eyes. "Laura said I'm too old to help with the kids. Like I'm past my use-by date." Nora patted her hand. "You're not old. You're wise, and your family will realize what they've lost." But Margaret wasn't so sure. One Friday, Margaret found Emma's favorite teddy bear wedged beneath the sofa, a tiny paw poking out. She held it to her chest, overwhelmed by longing. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Is there a moment when a mother becomes invisible? Or is it just a slow fade, one missed call at a time?" The weeks dragged on. Margaret tried to fill her calendar, volunteering more, joining a book club, even starting Tai Chi at the senior center. Still, she felt out of place everywhere. She missed the chaos of toys scattered on the rug, the sticky kisses at the door. One afternoon, she baked Emma's favorite chocolate chip cookies and packed them in a tin. On a whim, she walked the 3 blocks to Laura's house. Through the window, she saw the new sitter, a young woman, energetic and smiling, chasing the kids through the backyard. Laura waved from the kitchen, distracted by her laptop. Margaret hesitated on the porch, cookies in hand, feeling the ache of being replaced. She left the tin by the door, a silent offering, and walked home with tears in her eyes. That night, Margaret sat alone at her kitchen table, the emptiness pressing in. She wondered if this was how her mother had felt, all those years ago, watching her own children move on without her. Margaret promised herself she would find a way to matter again, not just for her family, but for herself. Margaret's days settled into a new, unwelcome quiet. She tried to keep busy, visiting the library, organizing her sewing supplies, even sorting old photos for an album she'd long meant to make. Yet everywhere she turned, she found reminders of her grandchildren. A pair of Emma's socks behind the radiator, Toby's hand-drawn Mother's Day card on the fridge. 4 weeks, Margaret received no calls from Laura. The loneliness pressed on her, sharpest in the evenings when the sun slipped behind the neighbors' trees and the house filled with long shadows. Her phone, once abuzz with requests for help, now remained stubbornly silent. Every so often, she'd text Laura, short, hopeful messages about the weather or a new recipe, but replies came slowly, if at all. At the Tuesday quilting group, Nora tried to coax Margaret out of her gloom. "Why not come with me to the community center's soup night?" she suggested. "It'll do you good to get out." Margaret agreed, more out of politeness than hope. That evening, surrounded by chatter and steaming bowls of homemade soup, she felt adrift, watching other grandparents bounce toddlers on their knees. As the days passed, a restlessness took hold. Margaret started walking longer routes through the neighborhood, waving at familiar faces and pausing at the park where she used to take Emma and Toby. She watched young families push strollers and marveled at how easily life moved on without her. She wondered if Laura missed her at all, or if, like a well-worn sweater, Margaret had simply been set aside, replaced by something newer. One Saturday afternoon, Margaret spotted Laura's car parked outside her house. Her heart leaped, only to sink when Laura didn't come to the door. Instead, she saw Laura hurriedly ushering the kids into the car, the new sitter trailing behind with a diaper bag. From a distance, Margaret caught Emma's face at the window, a fleeting, sad wave before the car pulled away. Unable to shake the sadness, Margaret called her son, Peter, who lived across town. "Just feeling a bit blue," she admitted. Peter, ever the optimist, tried to reassure her. "Mom, you did everything for us. Laura's just busy, she'll come around." That night, as Margaret prepared for bed, she heard a gentle knock at her door. It was Nora, holding a small potted plant. "Thought you could use some cheering up," she said, setting the plant on the table. Margaret hugged her friend tightly, grateful for the steady kindness. Before sleep, Margaret reread her old journals, searching for some comfort in the memories of busier, happier days. One entry, from years ago, caught her eye. "No one can replace a grandmother's love, not even the busiest mom or the brightest new sitter." As she drifted off, Margaret wondered if Laura's new solution was working out as well as her daughter had hoped. In her bones, Margaret sensed that family ties, though stretched thin, were not easily broken. The first real chill of summer's end crept in, and with it came an uneasy shift in Margaret's world. Early one morning, as she sipped her tea, her phone buzzed unexpectedly. It was a group text from Laura. "Emma's got a cold. Sorry for late notice. The sitter cancelled. WFH today, wish me luck." Margaret's heart skipped, but she resisted the urge to respond. Laura clearly didn't want her help. Instead, Margaret baked a loaf of banana bread and walked it to Nora's, sharing coffee and gentle conversation. Later that week, Margaret stopped by the grocery store. Near the checkout, she ran into Mrs. Walters, a neighbor and mother to 3 grown children. They exchanged pleasantries, but when Margaret mentioned she hadn't seen much of her grandkids, Mrs. Walters raised an eyebrow. "I've heard the new sitter is always on her phone," she said quietly. "Saw her at the park, kids running wild, not a care. Shame, really. No one watches like family." Margaret felt both comforted and uneasy. She tried not to dwell on it, but at the quilting group, similar stories surfaced. "Young people don't have the patience," one woman muttered. "You can't buy the kind of care a grandma gives." The next weekend, Margaret's doorbell rang. On her stoop stood Emma, clutching a crumpled tissue, and Laura behind her, looking harried. "Sorry, Mom. Emma wanted to see you. Toby's at a birthday party and the sitter double-booked herself. Just 10 minutes, I have a work call." Laura hustled inside, barely meeting Margaret's eyes. Margaret knelt to greet Emma, brushing a hand over the girl's warm forehead. "You look a little under the weather, sweetheart," she murmured. Emma nodded, sniffling. "I missed you, Grandma. The new lady lets us watch TV all day. I wanted to come here." Laura, in the kitchen, juggled her phone and laptop, muttering about deadlines. Margaret settled Emma with a blanket, a mug of warm cocoa, and a stack of favorite picture books. Emma relaxed, her little hand tucked in Margaret's. As Laura's meeting dragged on, Margaret made chicken soup and put on a pot of tea, falling naturally into her old rhythm. When Laura finally emerged, she paused at the doorway, watching her mother and daughter together. Something flickered across her face. Guilt, or regret, perhaps. "Thanks, Mom," she said quietly, gathering Emma. I didn't want to bother you, but today was a mess." Margaret only smiled, masking the sting of being called a bother. After they left, the house felt fuller, the warmth of Emma's visit lingering long after. That night, Margaret wrote, "Sometimes you're needed even when others won't admit it. Love has a way of finding its way back." The next morning brought a brief, surprising text from Laura. "Thank you. Don't know what I'd do without you. Hope you're free next week." Margaret set down her phone, a cautious hope rising within her. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as easy to replace as Laura once thought. Margaret didn't have to wait long for Laura's next request. That Monday, her phone rang mid-morning. Laura sounded tired, a hint of humility softening her usual briskness. "Mom, can you come over tomorrow? The sitter called in sick again, and I've got back-to-back meetings." "I know it's short notice." Margaret agreed without hesitation, but made her own terms clear. "If you want my help, I'll need to be able to do things my way. No second-guessing." Laura hesitated, then relented. "Of course, Mom. Whatever you need." The next day, Margaret arrived with a bag full of craft supplies, homemade soup, and her favorite storybooks. The house was a whirlwind, papers everywhere, laundry piled high, Emma sulking on the couch and Toby squabbling over tablet time. Laura greeted her at the door with a weary smile, already half distracted by her phone. Margaret quickly took charge. She set the kids up at the kitchen table with paper, crayons, and glue, guiding them as they created homemade cards for their parents. She told silly stories, coaxed giggles from Toby, and let Emma help stir the soup on the stove. Soon the house echoed with laughter and the smells of fresh bread. While the children napped, Margaret folded laundry and tidied the living room. She found herself humming as she worked, a sense of purpose replacing the sting of recent rejection. Laura emerged from her office, blinking at the transformation. "I haven't seen them this happy in weeks," she admitted, rubbing her eyes. Over a quiet cup of tea, Laura confessed more than she meant to. "The new sitter is nice, but the kids don't listen to her. She lets them watch TV all day, and I feel guilty leaving them, but work," she trailed off, the words thick with exhaustion. Margaret offered only kindness. "Parenting's hard. No one can do it alone. Not you, not me. But you do get to choose who's in your corner." Before she left, Emma threw her arms around Margaret's waist. "Don't go, Grandma. Stay for dinner." Laura watched the scene, her expression caught between relief and regret. "Would you?" she asked softly. "It's been a long time since we had you at our table." Margaret agreed, savoring a simple meal with her daughter and grandchildren. Conversation came easier as the evening stretched on, shared jokes, memories, even quiet apologies unspoken but understood. Back home, Margaret reflected on the day's unexpected peace. She felt tired, but satisfied, a sense that, finally, she was being valued not as a convenience, but as family. She wrote in her journal, "Sometimes you have to step away for others to remember your worth. I'm not just the past, I'm still needed, right here and now." As she settled in for the night, Margaret knew this shift might not last forever, but for now, it was enough. She drifted to sleep with the warmth of her family still around her. Margaret's next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. Laura called more often, sometimes just for advice, sometimes for help, always a little more gracious than before. Margaret, careful not to seem too eager, set boundaries. She would come over when asked, but not at the drop of a hat, and only if it suited her own schedule. Laura accepted this quietly, even apologizing once when she called too late in the evening. Emma and Toby's excitement at Margaret's visits became obvious. On Fridays, they'd wait at the window for her car. Margaret taught them to bake bread from scratch, and on rainy days, she helped them build forts in the living room or paint watercolors at the kitchen table. The children confided in her in ways they rarely did with anyone else. Emma shared her worries about school, and Toby asked for stories about Margaret's childhood. Word spread among Laura's friends about Margaret's reliability and warmth. One Saturday, a frazzled neighbor rang the bell, asking if Margaret could watch her daughter for an hour. Soon, other families began seeking her out, offering small thank-yous, a pie, a basket of fresh apples, a bouquet from a garden. Margaret accepted graciously, her heart swelling with the sense of purpose she'd thought she'd lost. Laura, noticing the change, sat down with Margaret one evening after the children were asleep. "I was wrong, Mom," she admitted quietly. "I thought you'd be happier with more free time. I never realized how much you mean to us, or how much I still need you." Margaret took Laura's hand. "We all make mistakes. I only wanted to help. But I won't disappear just because I'm older. I still have a lot to give." As the weather turned colder, Margaret's relationship with her daughter softened. There were still moments of tension. Old habits are hard to break, but both women learned to listen more and judge less. Margaret started to say no when she was too tired, and Laura respected it, growing more mindful of her mother's limits. Margaret also grew closer with Nora and the quilting group, sometimes inviting the children to join community events. Together, they made blankets for a local shelter, teaching Emma and Toby that care and kindness can ripple outward from even the smallest act. Late one night, after tucking the children into bed at Laura's house, Margaret stood at the window, watching snow begin to fall. She felt content, knowing she had weathered the season of invisibility, and found her place once again in the heart of her family. In her journal, she wrote, "Age isn't the end of being needed. Sometimes, it's just the beginning of a different kind of love." As the holidays approached, Margaret found herself juggling more invitations than she'd seen in years. Laura insisted that Margaret help plan Emma's birthday party. "No one else knows how to make your cupcakes, Mom." And Emma requested a grandma sleepover for her special day. Margaret spent hours with the children decorating invitations, stringing up handmade paper garlands, and frosting cupcakes with Emma's favorite rainbow sprinkles. The party was a lively affair, with children from the neighborhood crowding into Laura's living room, paper hats askew and laughter echoing through the house. Margaret moved from group to group, tying shoelaces, telling stories, organizing games. Parents stopped to thank her, some quietly asking for babysitting tips or advice on handling tantrums. Laura beamed as Margaret led the children in a spirited game of musical chairs, pride and gratitude shining in her eyes. Later, as the house quieted and the last child was picked up, Laura sat at the kitchen table, exhausted but happy. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Mom," she said, her voice soft. "You saved the day again." Margaret smiled, feeling more seen than she had in months. "You could always ask," she teased gently. Laura laughed, a real, unguarded sound. Winter settled in, and with it came snow and cozy evenings. Margaret spent afternoons teaching the children to knit, sipping cocoa as Emma worked on her first scarf and Toby made a valiant, lopsided attempt at a hat. Laura joined in, awkwardly at first, but soon laughing at her own uneven stitches. It was the closest the three generations had felt in a long time. The local community center hosted a holiday fair, and Margaret volunteered to help run the craft booth. Emma and Toby joined her, their excitement contagious as they sold hand-painted ornaments and greeted visitors. Laura stopped by on her lunch break, watching her children and her mother work together. For the first time, she saw the quiet strength and joy Margaret brought not only to her family but to the whole community. That night, after the fair, Laura drove Margaret home. In the car, Laura grew quiet. "I know I pushed you away," she admitted. "I thought I was protecting you, and maybe myself. But I see now how wrong I was. I hope you'll always be part of our lives." Margaret squeezed her daughter's hand. "You can't get rid of me that easily," she said with a wink. Back in her own kitchen, Margaret felt the fullness of her life. She knew now, more than ever, that being needed had nothing to do with age, and everything to do with love, patience, and presence. She wrote in her journal, "When we are welcomed back, not out of duty, but out of genuine want, that is a gift worth waiting for." The new year dawned cold and bright, sunlight glinting off the snowdrifts piled along Margaret Street. After the holidays, life settled into a gentle routine. Margaret spent Mondays at the quilting group, Wednesdays volunteering at the library, and 2 afternoons a week at Laura's, watching the children until Laura came home. Sometimes she joined them for dinner, helping Emma with homework or reading to Toby before bed. Other times, she returned to her quiet house, grateful for both the bustle and the solitude. Emma, emboldened by her grandma time, started a scrapbook project, collecting photos and mementos from their adventures. Toby insisted Margaret attend his school play, beaming from the stage when he spotted her in the front row. Margaret found herself included in every family plan, birthday parties, weekend picnics, even the annual spring cleaning day, which ended in flour-dusted chaos as 3 generations baked bread together. One afternoon, Laura invited Margaret to a parent-teacher conference. "You know the kids better than anyone," Laura admitted. Margaret felt honored, and the teacher greeted her warmly, remarking on Emma's creativity and Toby's kindness, traits she recognized as seeds she herself had helped to plant. Outside, Laura paused, looking at Margaret with new appreciation. "You always know what they need, before I do, sometimes. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." Margaret smiled, brushing a stray hair from Emma's forehead. "Sometimes we only appreciate what we almost lost." The next weekend, Laura suggested they start a new family tradition, Grandma Day. Once a month, the children would stay with Margaret for an entire day. No screens, just crafts, baking, walks, and stories. Margaret's heart swelled at the thought, and she planned activities for weeks in advance, creating scavenger hunts in the park and teaching Emma how to make her famous blueberry muffins from scratch. Neighbors and friends noticed the change. Laura spoke openly about how much Margaret's presence meant, and other families started to ask Margaret for advice: how to manage tantrums, keep kids busy, or simply create memories that lasted. Margaret felt not only needed, but respected, her years of experience suddenly invaluable to a new generation. Nora, always a steadfast friend, teased her at quilting, "See? You're the matriarch now. And you're busier than ever." Margaret laughed, feeling both pride and deep contentment. In her journal that night, she wrote, "The greatest gift of age is to be trusted with a child's heart and a family's hopes. When that trust is given back, freely and fully, you realize you were never too old, only waiting for your moment." As winter waned and the days grew longer, Margaret's life was full of purpose, laughter, and a belonging she'd almost forgotten could be hers. Spring arrived with a riot of color, tulips nodding in Margaret's front garden, robins chattering from every branch. With the longer days, Margaret's calendar filled with new invitations. Emma's school held a grandparents' tea, and Emma insisted Margaret sit beside her, introducing her to classmates as the best grandma ever. Toby begged Margaret to chaperone his class field trip, and Margaret, with a twinkle in her eye, agreed, delighting in a day spent exploring the children's museum hand in hand. Laura's gratitude was quieter now, woven into daily life, a text with a heart emoji, an extra slice of pie set aside, her name added to every family plan. Margaret found herself invited to Laura's work events as well, charming Laura's colleagues with her warmth and wit. There were occasional stumbles, days when old patterns threatened to return, when Laura grew tense or Margaret felt unsure, but the foundation had changed. Mutual respect, hard-won, was now the rule between them. At the quilting group's annual show, Margaret was honored for her years of service. Her story featured in the community newsletter as an example of ageless purpose. Emma and Toby came with Laura, proudly pointing to Margaret's blue ribbon quilt. "My grandma taught me how to sew," Emma announced to anyone who would listen. Margaret continued to host Grandma Day, each month building new memories. Gardening lessons, picnics under the apple tree, baking bread with neighborhood children invited to join. Her home, once so quiet, now rang with laughter, tiny feet, and the clatter of cookie sheets. Even Nora commented, "You've built a village, Margaret." On a warm Sunday afternoon, Laura and the children surprised Margaret with a garden party. Emma had made a banner that read, "Thank you, Grandma." Toby presented a bouquet of daffodils, and Laura stood before their friends and neighbors, her voice choked with emotion. "Mom, I thought I was helping you by stepping back. But you've shown me, and everyone here, that love, patience, and wisdom don't have an age limit. We're so lucky you're ours." Margaret hugged them all tightly, her heart full. That night, as twilight painted the sky, she sat by her open window and wrote her final journal entry for this chapter. "I was once told I was too old to matter. Now I know, love makes us timeless. The gifts we give return to us, fuller and brighter than before." With that, Margaret closed her journal, content in the knowledge that she was right where she belonged, at the very heart of her family, needed and cherished, her legacy written not in years, but in love.